My husband's ex wore their cancelled wedding dress she bought to marry him 10 years ago to our reception. Then I discovered the secret messages she had been sending him for months behind my back, and her husband revealed everything. Last month, I, 32F, finally got married to my boyfriend, 29M, of 3 years, and it was truly a magnificent event, except for one thing that keeps gnawing at me every night before I fall asleep. Ever since I was a little girl, I wanted an extravagant, fairy tale wedding. I know many people might roll their eyes at that, but it was my dream. My parents never had much money when I was growing up, and I always promised myself that when I got married, I would have the celebration I always imagined. My husband, Chris, was completely supportive of this idea and told me to plan whatever wedding would make me happy. We decided on a royal ball theme. We rented this beautiful historic mansion with marble columns and a massive crystal chandelier in the center of the ballroom. The decorations included thousands of fairy lights, fresh flowers everywhere, and gold accents throughout the venue. I wanted everyone at the wedding to look like they belonged in a castle, so I made a somewhat unusual request for the dress code. I told our guests to wear the absolute fanciest clothes they owned. I encouraged women to wear ball gowns, formal evening dresses, or even their own wedding dresses if they were already married. I told people they could feel free to try to outshine me. The goal was to create a room full of incredibly well-dressed people. My bridesmaids wore custom-made gold dresses that looked like something out of a movie. Even the men went all out. My father-in-law wore a vintage tuxedo with tails, and my brother came in a dark blue velvet suit. For my own outfit, I had a custom dress made with 2 parts. The ceremony dress was a massive white ball gown with thousands of tiny crystals sewn into the bodice and a skirt so wide I could barely fit through doorways. For the reception, the outer skirt detached to reveal a sleek, form-fitting dress underneath with a thigh-high slit. I felt like an absolute queen. Now, to provide some background about my husband and his ex, 29F. Chris grew up in a very small rural town where everyone knows everyone. His childhood friend and high school sweetheart was a girl named Charlotte. According to Chris, they started dating when they were 15 and got engaged when they were 18, right before graduation. Apparently, this wasn't unusual in their community. Many people married their high school sweethearts right after graduation. However, about 2 months before their wedding date, they mutually decided they weren't ready for marriage. They were both planning to attend college, and they realized they were rushing into a permanent commitment when they had barely experienced life outside their small town. The split was amicable, and they remained friends. Charlotte went to a different college than Chris, and they both dated other people. When Chris and I first started dating, he was completely open about his history with Charlotte. He mentioned that she was still part of his friend group, and I would likely meet her at some point. This didn't bother me at all. I'm also friends with a couple of my exes, and I believe that just because a romantic relationship didn't work out doesn't mean you can't maintain a friendship. I met Charlotte about 3 months into my relationship with Chris when we went back to his hometown for a friend's birthday celebration. My first impression was that she seemed friendly enough, if a bit reserved around me. This seemed natural, given the circumstances. Over the next few months, as I got to know her better, my opinion of her changed significantly. Charlotte had a habit of making subtle digs at me that were disguised as jokes or innocent comments. When she found out I was 3 years older than Chris, she started referring to me as his mature girlfriend or sometimes cougar with a little laugh, despite the age gap being minimal. When she discovered I was in medical school studying to become an anesthesiologist, she made comments like, "I could never date a doctor, they're never home," while looking directly at Chris. At a group dinner, she told everyone that she found my laugh a bit much and mimicked it in an exaggerated way. Whenever I would call her out on these comments, she would claim I was being overly sensitive or that I simply couldn't take a joke. It became obvious to me that she still harbored feelings for Chris, despite her insistence that their romantic relationship was ancient history. About a year before Chris proposed to me, Charlotte got married to a guy named Greg. They both work as teachers in the same school district. She teaches first grade and he teaches high school history. Chris and I attended their wedding, which was a modest but lovely ceremony at Greg's parents' farm. Charlotte wore a simple white A-line dress with lace detailing. It was pretty but nothing extravagant, which made sense given their teacher salaries. Something I learned later was that Charlotte actually had 2 wedding dresses. The first was the one she wore to marry Greg. The second was the dress she had purchased for her wedding to Chris all those years ago. This dress was paid for by her father, who passed away during her sophomore year of college, making it a sentimental item for her. I had seen this unused dress several times. Charlotte and Greg often hosted gatherings at their house before group outings, and while looking for the bathroom once, I accidentally walked into their bedroom where the closet door was open. I noticed 2 wedding dresses hanging side by side and asked Charlotte about them later. She explained that one was from her wedding to Greg, and the other was the dress she never got to wear when she and Chris called off their wedding. The unused dress was much more elaborate, a champagne-colored gown with intricate lace patterns, a modest v-neck with a delicate collar, and a train featuring embroidered flowers. Charlotte mentioned that her father had spent a significant amount on it, and she couldn't bear to sell it after he died. Fast forward to my wedding day. Everything was going perfectly. The ceremony was beautiful, the venue looked magical, and everyone followed the fancy dress code beyond my wildest expectations. Several of my married friends wore their wedding dresses. My cousin and her friends came in gorgeous quinceañera dresses they hadn't worn since they were 15. Some people even rented formal attire specifically for the occasion. During the reception, I was making my rounds to greet all the guests when I spotted Charlotte and Greg. Greg was wearing a standard black tuxedo, but Charlotte was wearing the wedding dress that she had originally purchased for her wedding with Chris. My stomach dropped. Of all the wedding dresses she could have worn, including her actual wedding dress from her marriage to Greg, she chose to wear the dress she had purchased to marry my husband. I simply stood there, frozen for a moment, before plastering a smile on my face and moving on to the next table without saying hello to them. I didn't want to cause a scene at my own wedding. Later, Chris came up to me and asked if I had seen what Charlotte was wearing. When I nodded, he told me he had already spoken to her about it. According to him, Charlotte's justification was, well, she wanted a fairy tale wedding and told everyone to wear their fanciest clothes. This is my fanciest dress, and since I never got to wear it to a wedding, I thought this was the perfect opportunity. Don't tell me she's upset about it, she's the one who said to try to outshine her. I bit my tongue and tried to enjoy the rest of my reception. The wedding was otherwise perfect, we had an amazing dinner, our first dance went off without a hitch, and all our friends and family had a wonderful time. But every time I caught a glimpse of Charlotte in that dress, the dress she had intended to wear to marry my husband, it felt like a slap in the face. Now, almost a month later, I'm still dwelling on this. During the day, I can convince myself that it's not a big deal and that I'm overreacting. But at night, when I'm trying to fall asleep, I keep replaying it in my mind. The fact that, of all the dresses she could have worn, she chose that one seems like a deliberate act to cause discomfort. Part of me feels like I don't have the right to be upset because I did technically tell women they could wear wedding dresses to my wedding. I just never imagined that Charlotte would choose to wear the dress she had intended to marry my husband in, rather than the dress from her actual wedding to Greg. I feel like she should have asked me first, given the history and significance of that particular dress. Chris thinks what she did was inappropriate and showed a lack of respect for our marriage. But I can't help wondering if I'm being unreasonable. Am I wrong to be upset about this? Update 1. It's been 2 weeks since my original post, and first, I want to thank everyone for their comments and support. Many of you confirmed what I had been thinking, that Charlotte's choice to wear that specific dress was inappropriate and seemed intentionally designed to make me uncomfortable. The morning after I made my post, I finally had a real conversation with Chris about the whole situation. I had been hesitant to bring it up again because I didn't want to seem like I was still fixated on this one negative aspect of our otherwise beautiful wedding. But after reading your comments, I realized I needed to address it directly instead of letting it fester. When I brought up the dress situation, Chris immediately looked relieved. He admitted that he had been bothered by it since the wedding but didn't know how to approach the subject with me. Apparently, at the reception, when he first saw Charlotte in that dress, he was so shocked that he immediately went to speak with her about it. He revealed something I hadn't known. He had actually considered asking her and Greg to leave the wedding entirely because he found her choice so disrespectful, but he decided against it because I seemed to be handling the situation calmly, and he didn't want to create drama. He told me that when he confronted Charlotte at the reception, she tried to justify her actions by referencing my dress code instructions. She claimed that since I had encouraged women to wear their fanciest clothes, even wedding dresses, she was simply following my wishes by wearing her most elaborate gown. When Chris pointed out that she could have worn her actual wedding dress from her marriage to Greg, she countered that the never-worn dress was of higher quality and better suited to our royal ball theme. But then Chris told me something that really floored me. Apparently, 2 days before our wedding, Charlotte had called Chris to catch up and during that conversation, specifically asked him if he remembered her original wedding dress. When he said yes, she mentioned she still had it and was thinking of finally putting it to good use. Chris said he didn't think much of the comment at the time, assuming she might be planning to sell it or donate it. This revelation changed everything for me. This wasn't a spontaneous decision or a misunderstanding of my dress code, it was premeditated. She had deliberately brought up the dress to Chris before the wedding, almost as if she was testing the waters or giving him advance warning. After our conversation, Chris and I decided that we needed to establish firmer boundaries with Charlotte. Her behavior at our wedding was just the latest in a pattern of disrespect, and it was time to address it directly. 2 days later, Chris called Charlotte and asked if we could meet with her and Greg for coffee. We met at a neutral location, a small cafe halfway between our house and theirs. I was nervous about the confrontation, but I knew it was necessary. When we arrived, I noticed Charlotte seemed unusually cheerful, almost smug. Greg, on the other hand, looked distinctly uncomfortable. We ordered our drinks and made small talk for a few minutes before Chris brought up the real reason for our meeting. Chris calmly explained that we wanted to discuss the wedding dress incident. Immediately, Charlotte's expression changed. Before Chris could even finish explaining why we were upset, she jumped in defensively. She repeated her justification about following my dress code instructions and insisted she had no ulterior motives. She claimed she was simply trying to honor her father's memory by finally wearing the dress he had paid for. What happened next surprised me. Greg, who had been silent until this point, suddenly spoke up. He told us that he had actually tried to convince Charlotte not to wear that particular dress to our wedding. He felt it was inappropriate given its history, but Charlotte had insisted. According to Greg, she had tried on both wedding dresses the week before our wedding and had spent hours deciding which to wear. Charlotte looked shocked and betrayed by Greg's revelation. She accused him of taking my side and said he didn't understand the sentimental value of the dress. Greg countered by pointing out that if sentiment was the only factor, she could have found another special occasion to wear it that didn't involve Chris. The conversation quickly devolved from there. Charlotte became increasingly defensive and began bringing up unrelated issues from the past. She accused Chris of always taking my side in everything since we started dating. She complained that their friend group had changed since I entered the picture. She even had the audacity to suggest that Chris had settled by marrying me instead of waiting for the right person. At that point, Chris stood up and said we were done with the conversation. He told Charlotte that her behavior at our wedding was just the final example of the disrespect she had shown me throughout our relationship. He said that until she could acknowledge her actions and sincerely apologize, we would be taking a step back from our friendship with her. We left the cafe with Charlotte still arguing and Greg looking mortified. On the drive home, Chris was quiet for a long time before finally apologizing to me. He said he had always dismissed my concerns about Charlotte's behavior as simple misunderstandings or personality clashes. He never wanted to believe that his childhood friend could be deliberately trying to undermine our relationship. Now, he said, he couldn't deny the pattern anymore. The aftermath of this confrontation has been messy. Several of our mutual friends have reached out after hearing Charlotte's version of events, which apparently paints her as the victim of my bridezilla behavior. Chris has had to explain our side of the story multiple times, which has been exhausting for both of us. Greg called Chris 2 days after our cafe meeting to apologize for how things had escalated. He admitted that Charlotte's behavior toward me had been a source of tension in their marriage as well. Apparently, she frequently compared their relationship unfavorably to Chris's and my relationship, and she often brought up her history with Chris in ways that made Greg uncomfortable. Right now, Chris and I are taking some space from Charlotte. We haven't blocked her or declared that we'll never speak to her again, but we've made it clear that the ball is in her court. If she wants to maintain a friendship with us, she needs to reflect on her behavior and offer a genuine apology. In the meantime, we're focusing on enjoying our newlywed life. We've just returned from our honeymoon in Greece, which was absolute paradise and exactly what we needed after all this drama. I'm trying not to let this situation overshadow all the wonderful aspects of our wedding and the start of our marriage. I'll update again if there are any significant developments with Charlotte, but for now, we're moving forward with our lives and leaving this negativity behind us. Update 2. It's been about 6 weeks since my last update, and a lot has happened that I never saw coming. After returning from our honeymoon, Chris and I tried to put the whole wedding dress incident behind us. We hadn't heard from Charlotte directly, though a few mutual friends mentioned she was still upset about our confrontation at the cafe. We decided to give the situation space and focus on settling into married life. Then, about 4 weeks ago, we received a text message from Greg asking if he could meet with us alone, without Charlotte knowing. This seemed unusual and concerning, but we agreed to meet him for lunch on a day when Charlotte would be at a teacher training workshop. When Greg arrived at the restaurant, he looked exhausted and stressed. He ordered a beer immediately, which was surprising since it was only 11:30 a.m. and I'd never seen him drink before lunch. After some hesitant small talk, he finally told us why he had wanted to meet. According to Greg, since our confrontation at the cafe, Charlotte had become increasingly obsessed with Chris and me. She would constantly check our social media accounts, analyze every photo we posted from our honeymoon, and make disparaging comments about me. Greg said he had found a journal where Charlotte had written extensively about Chris, describing him as the one who got away and speculating about how different her life would have been if they had gotten married as planned. What was most disturbing was that Greg discovered Charlotte had been sending Chris private messages for months before our wedding, messages that Chris had never seen because they went to an old email account he rarely checked. Greg found these messages while using Charlotte's laptop to grade papers. He wasn't snooping intentionally, the emails were open in a browser tab. The messages started innocuously enough, reminiscing about high school memories or sharing inside jokes, but gradually became more personal. In the weeks leading up to our wedding, Charlotte had sent several messages expressing doubt about whether Chris was making the right choice by marrying me. The final message, sent just 3 days before our wedding, explicitly suggested that it wasn't too late for Chris to reconsider his options. Chris was absolutely shocked. He hadn't checked that old email account in at least a year and had no idea these messages existed. He immediately pulled out his phone, logged into the account, and confirmed everything Greg had told us. The messages were exactly as described, starting friendly but becoming increasingly inappropriate as our wedding approached. Greg then revealed that he had confronted Charlotte about these messages the previous night, which led to their biggest fight ever. He told her that her behavior was unhealthy and unfair to both him and us. Charlotte initially denied any inappropriate intentions, claiming she was just maintaining a friendship with an old friend. When Greg pointed out the content of the later messages, she broke down and admitted she had never fully gotten over Chris. According to Greg, Charlotte confessed that wearing the original wedding dress to our wedding was a deliberate attempt to remind Chris of their history and what might have been. She admitted to hoping it would make him question his decision to marry me. Greg said he was devastated by this revelation and had spent the night at his brother's house. Chris and I were stunned into silence. While I had always suspected Charlotte still had feelings for Chris, I never imagined she would go to such lengths or be so calculating in her attempts to undermine our relationship. Greg told us he was considering a separation. He said he had always felt like he was competing with Chris's ghost in his marriage, but he had convinced himself it was just insecurity on his part. Now that Charlotte had explicitly confirmed his fears, he didn't know if their marriage could recover. After Greg left, Chris immediately checked the email account more thoroughly and found even more messages from Charlotte that Greg hadn't mentioned. Some included old photos of Chris and Charlotte together, with comments about how happy they had been. Chris was visibly upset and kept apologizing to me, even though none of this was his fault. He said he felt responsible for not seeing Charlotte's true intentions earlier and for dismissing my concerns about her behavior. That evening, Chris made the decision to completely cut ties with Charlotte. He sent her a brief but firm email stating that he had discovered the messages she had been sending, and that her behavior, culminating in wearing their would-be wedding dress to our wedding, was completely unacceptable. He made it clear that he wanted no further contact with her and asked her to respect his decision. The fallout was immediate and messy. Charlotte called, texted, and emailed Chris repeatedly, alternating between apologies, justifications, and accusations. She claimed Greg had misrepresented their conversation, that I had always tried to come between her and Chris, and that she was just trying to be a supportive friend. Chris blocked her number and email address after the first day of this barrage. We also had to deal with the ripple effects through our social circle. Some of Chris's childhood friends, people who had known both Chris and Charlotte since elementary school, felt caught in the middle. A few suggested we were overreacting or that we should give Charlotte another chance for the sake of the group. Chris stood firm, explaining that while he wasn't asking anyone to choose sides, he needed to prioritize our marriage and his own peace of mind. As for Greg and Charlotte, we heard through mutual friends that they've started marriage counseling. Greg decided not to move forward with separation immediately, but told friends that he needed to see real change before he could fully recommit to their marriage. This whole situation has been more dramatic and painful than I ever expected when I made my original post about a wedding dress. What seemed like an isolated incident of poor judgment turned out to be the tip of an iceberg of unresolved feelings and inappropriate behavior. Chris and I are still processing everything, but we're united in our decision to maintain firm boundaries. We've also had some really good conversations about communication in our own relationship and the importance of addressing concerns directly rather than letting them fester. Sometimes I wonder if I should feel vindicated that my instincts about Charlotte were proven right, but mostly I just feel sad for everyone involved, especially Greg, who seems like a genuinely good person caught in a difficult situation. Update 3. It's been nearly 5 months since my last update, and I wanted to share some final developments that brought unexpected closure to this whole situation. Chris and I have maintained our distance from Charlotte. We removed her from our social media accounts and asked our closest friends not to discuss her with us. This created some awkwardness with certain friends, particularly those who had known both Chris and Charlotte since childhood, but most people respected our boundaries. About 3 months ago, we received a thick envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside was a handwritten letter from Charlotte, along with several photographs and mementos from Chris's childhood that she had kept over the years. The letter was long and detailed. Charlotte explained that she had been in intensive therapy since our confrontation and the subsequent fallout with Greg. She acknowledged that her behavior toward me had been inappropriate from the beginning of my relationship with Chris, and that wearing the original wedding dress to our wedding was a deliberate attempt to cause discomfort and possibly create doubt in Chris's mind. She wrote that therapy had helped her recognize that she had never properly processed the end of her relationship with Chris. Even though they had mutually agreed to call off their wedding, she had secretly harbored hopes that they would eventually find their way back to each other. When Chris met me and their relationship became serious, she felt threatened and responded by trying to undermine me at every opportunity. Charlotte also revealed something neither of us had known. During the year before our wedding, she and Greg had been trying unsuccessfully to start a family. The stress and disappointment of this struggle, combined with seeing Chris and me plan our wedding, had intensified her fixation on the past and what might have been. She recognized this wasn't an excuse for her behavior but offered it as context for her unhealthy state of mind. The letter concluded with an apology to both Chris and me. She didn't ask for forgiveness or for us to re-establish contact. Instead, she wrote that she was returning items that rightfully belonged to Chris and that she was committed to moving forward with her own life and marriage. She mentioned that she and Greg were continuing with couples therapy and that she was working hard to focus on her present rather than dwelling on the past. Chris and I discussed the letter at length. While the apology seemed sincere, we agreed that re-establishing a friendship with Charlotte wasn't the right choice for us. Too much damage had been done, and we valued the peace we had found in her absence from our lives. Chris wrote a brief but polite response acknowledging her apology and wishing her well, but making it clear that we preferred to maintain our distance. As for Greg and Charlotte, we heard through mutual friends that they decided to relocate. Greg accepted a teaching position at a school district in a neighboring state, about 3 hours away from our town. Charlotte found a job at the same school. From what we understand, they're still together and working on their marriage. The move seems to be part of their effort to make a fresh start away from the complex history and social connections in our community. In an unexpected turn of events, this whole situation has actually strengthened some of our other friendships. 2 of Chris's childhood friends, Mike and Sarah, who had initially been sympathetic to Charlotte, reached out to apologize after learning more details about her behavior. They admitted they had dismissed my concerns about Charlotte over the years as mere jealousy, and they regretted not seeing the situation more clearly. We've grown closer to them in recent months, and they've become regular fixtures in our weekend plans. As for Chris and me, we've settled into married life quite happily. The drama with Charlotte now feels like a distant chapter that we've moved beyond. If anything positive came from this experience, it's that Chris and I learned the importance of direct communication and unified boundaries early in our marriage. We've carried these lessons forward in dealing with other relationships and challenges. Looking back at my original post, it seems almost trivial now, being upset about a wedding dress. I couldn't have imagined how that single incident would unravel into such a complex situation involving secret messages, hidden feelings, and the near dissolution of another marriage. It's a reminder that sometimes what appears on the surface is just a symptom of much deeper issues. I still occasionally think about Charlotte's dress, the champagne-colored gown with lace and embroidered flowers that was meant for a wedding that never happened. In her letter, Charlotte mentioned that she finally sold the dress to a consignment shop after keeping it for over a decade. There's something poetic about that, finally letting go of the physical reminder of an unrealized future. I hope that symbolism extends to her emotional attachments as well. Chris and I have now been married for just over 6 months. We recently bought our first house together and are in the process of renovating it. Life moves forward, and the wedding dress drama, while significant at the time, has become just a story we tell, a strange beginning to what will hopefully be a long and happy marriage. Now let's move to the next story. Story 2. My best friend was the best man at my wedding, but he'd been sleeping with my wife since college and fathered my first child. Last week changed my entire life. I, 32M, was cleaning up my wife Andrea's, 30F, phone because it was running slow and she asked me to free up some storage space. She handed me her phone without hesitation and went to take a shower. While going through her message recycle bin to clear up space, I found something that made my blood run cold. There was a message from Nash, 31M, our mutual friend of 8 years, that read, "I can't stop thinking about all the things I want to do to you when I see you again." I met Nash and Andrea during our college days back in 2015. We were all part of the same study group for our economics class. Nash was always the life of our group, charming, funny, and someone everyone wanted to be friends with. He had this way of making people feel special, especially Andrea. Back then, I never thought anything of it. We were all just good friends trying to survive college together. Andrea and I started dating in our final year of college. Nash was actually the one who encouraged me to ask her out. He kept telling me how perfect we would be together and how he had never seen Andrea happier than when she was around me. When we finally got together, Nash was our biggest supporter. He helped me plan dates, gave me advice, and was always there for both of us. We got married in 2017, and naturally, Nash was my best man. I still remember his speech at our wedding, how he talked about being there from the beginning of our relationship and how he knew we were meant to be together. Everyone was crying happy tears. Andrea even joked that Nash's speech was better than her father's. After the wedding, Nash remained a constant part of our lives. He would come over for dinner at least twice a week, sometimes more. Andrea and I both worked, but she had more flexible hours at her graphic design job while I often had to stay late at the accounting firm. During those times, Nash would keep Andrea company. I actually appreciated it because I didn't want her to feel lonely. When Tommy, our son, was born 3 years ago, Nash was one of the first people at the hospital. He became Uncle Nash to Tommy, always bringing him gifts and taking him to the park. Tommy adores him. I used to think how lucky we were to have such a dedicated friend in our lives. Andrea is now 4 months pregnant with our second child. We were both excited when we found out, though Nash's reaction was oddly subdued. He congratulated us but seemed distant afterward. At the time, I chalked it up to him being busy with work. After finding that first message, I spent hours going through her phone while she was asleep. The deleted messages between them went back months. Most were casual conversations about daily stuff, but there were these moments of flirting that made my stomach turn. Messages like "miss your smile" and "thinking about last week" were scattered throughout their chats. They had apparently been meeting for coffee regularly when I was at work. Andrea never mentioned these meetings to me. There were also messages about meeting at his apartment to watch movies and references to inside jokes I knew nothing about. The worst part was finding messages where they discussed how to keep their meetings secret from me. Looking back now, there were so many red flags I ignored. The way Andrea's face would light up when Nash entered the room. How they always seemed to have private jokes. The lingering hugs that went on just a bit too long. The times Andrea would dress up extra nice when she knew Nash was coming over. Tommy's features have always bothered me, but I pushed those thoughts away. He has Nash's brown eyes and his curly hair, while Andrea and I both have blue eyes and straight hair. I always told myself he must take after Andrea's grandfather, who also had brown eyes. Now I'm not so sure. The timing of this second pregnancy coincides with a business trip I took 4 months ago. I was gone for a week, and Nash helped Andrea with some house repairs during that time. Now I wonder what really happened that week. Andrea has been acting completely normal since that day. She still kisses me goodbye every morning, talks about baby names, and plans Tommy's upcoming birthday party. Just yesterday, she asked if we should invite Nash since he's such a good uncle to Tommy. The way she can act so normal is driving me crazy. I've lost weight this past week from stress. I can barely sleep, and when I do, I have nightmares about them together. Work is suffering because I can't focus. My colleagues have noticed something's wrong, but I can't bring myself to tell anyone. Yesterday, Nash called me out of the blue. He wants to meet for drinks this weekend, says he has something important to discuss. I agreed, trying to keep my voice steady. Part of me hopes he'll confess everything, but another part dreads hearing the truth from his mouth. I don't know what to do anymore. Should I confront Andrea with what I found? Should I wait and see what Nash has to say? Should I hire a private investigator to gather more evidence? The thought of Andrea being with Nash, possibly for years, makes me physically sick. The possibility that Tommy might not be mine is eating me alive. Every happy memory we've shared feels like a lie now. Our wedding day, Tommy's birth, family vacations, were they all just a cover for their affair? How many times did they laugh at me behind my back? How many of our friends know about this? I keep cycling between rage, despair, and numbness. One moment I want to confront them both and scream, the next I want to just pack my bags and disappear. The only thing stopping me from doing anything rash is Tommy. He's innocent in all this, and I can't bear the thought of hurting him, even if he might not be mine biologically. I need advice. How do I handle this situation? How do I face Nash this weekend? How do I look at Andrea without falling apart? Everything I thought I knew about my life seems like a cruel joke now. Update 1. The past 2 weeks have been absolute hell. I met with Nash last weekend at a bar across town, far from our usual hangout spots. I arrived early and had 2 drinks just to steady my nerves. When he walked in, he looked nervous but tried to act normal, giving me our usual fist bump greeting that now felt like a mockery of our friendship. He ordered a beer and started telling me about this amazing job opportunity in Seattle, how a tech company had headhunted him and offered him double his current salary. The whole time he was talking, I just stared at him, wondering how many times he had lied to my face over the years. When he finally finished his cheerful monologue about his bright future, I pulled out my phone and showed him the screenshots I had taken of his messages with Andrea. The change in his demeanor was instant. All the false cheerfulness drained from his face, replaced by a sickly pale color. His hands started shaking so badly he had to put his beer down. For a long moment, he just sat there, opening and closing his mouth like a fish out of water. Then everything came pouring out. He and Andrea had been sleeping together for the past year, but their history went much deeper than that. They had been friends with benefits throughout college, something they both decided to hide from me when Andrea and I started dating. According to Nash, they ended things completely when Andrea and I got serious, but the attraction never really went away. The affair started up again during my business trip to Chicago last year. Nash had come over to help Andrea fix a leaking pipe in our bathroom, a job I had been postponing for weeks. They ended up drinking wine after the work was done, one thing led to another, and they slept together. After that, it became a regular thing. Nash's voice cracked as he told me they tried to end it several times, but always found their way back to each other. They would meet at his apartment during Andrea's lunch breaks, or when I'd work late. Sometimes, when I was away on business trips, he would stay over at our house after I had gone to sleep on video call with Andrea. The revelation about Tommy felt like a physical blow. Nash admitted that he and Andrea had a brief reunion just before she and I started officially dating. The timing coincided perfectly with Tommy's conception. All these years, they both suspected but never got tested, choosing to live in denial. I sat there, feeling like I was watching my life burn down around me. Every word he spoke was another match to the gasoline. He kept apologizing, tears running down his face, saying he never meant for any of this to happen. The job in Seattle, he revealed, was his attempt to remove himself from the situation. He claimed he had been feeling guilty for months. After leaving the bar, I drove around the city for hours, trying to process everything. When I finally got home around midnight, Andrea was waiting up for me. One look at my face and she knew. She knew that I knew everything. What followed was the worst night of my life. Andrea broke down completely, confirming everything Nash had told me. She fell to her knees, begging me not to leave her, swearing that the baby she's carrying is definitely mine. They had been careful since she found out she was pregnant. The most painful part was learning about their college relationship. All those times I had talked to Nash about my feelings for Andrea, asked his advice about dating her, shared my insecurities, he had already been intimate with her. They had both sat through my wedding planning, helping me create the perfect day, while keeping this massive secret. Andrea's confession got worse as the night went on. She admitted that several of our friends knew about their past relationship but had agreed to keep quiet about it. The monthly book club she attended? Sometimes she would skip it to meet Nash. Those extra yoga classes? More lies. The next morning, Andrea's sister Lisa showed up at our door. Apparently, Andrea had called her in hysterics after our confrontation. Lisa tried to play mediator, telling me how sorry Andrea was, how she would do anything to save our marriage. She brought up the pregnancy, warning me about the effects of stress on the baby. She even tried to minimize the affair, saying lots of marriages survive infidelity. I asked Lisa how long she had known about Nash and Andrea's history. Her hesitation told me everything. She had known since college. Everyone had known except me. I was the fool who had no idea his wife and best friend had a sexual history together. Andrea has been staying in our guest room since that night. She keeps trying to talk to me, to explain herself, but I can barely look at her. Tommy, thankfully, is too young to understand what's happening. He just knows that mommy and daddy are sad. I've contacted a lawyer secretly. I don't know if I'm ready to make any decisions yet, but I need to know my options. The possibility that Tommy isn't mine complicates everything. The lawyer suggested getting a paternity test done before proceeding with anything. Nash has been blowing up my phone with messages and calls, probably trying to do damage control before he leaves for Seattle. I've blocked his number. Andrea's family members keep calling too, all trying to convince me to work things out. Her mother even suggested marriage counseling, as if therapy could fix years of lies and betrayal. Right now, I'm just trying to get through each day. I go to work, come home, play with Tommy, and pretend everything is normal. But nothing feels normal anymore. Every time I look at Tommy, I search his face for traces of Nash. Every time Andrea touches me, I wonder if she's comparing me to him. I feel like I'm living in a bad dream, waiting to wake up. But there's no waking up from this nightmare. Update 2. The past 2 months have felt like a slow-motion car crash. After weeks of agonizing over it, I finally got the paternity test done for Tommy. The results came in yesterday morning, -0% probability that I'm his biological father. Even though I had suspected it, seeing those results in black and white destroyed something in me. I broke down in my car in the clinic's parking lot. I also did a prenatal paternity test for our unborn child. At least there was one piece of good news: this baby is definitely mine. The relief I felt was immediately followed by guilt because a part of me had hoped it wasn't. It would have made leaving easier. Andrea moved out last week. She's staying with her parents now. The night before she left, she tried one last time to convince me to work things out. She brought up our history together, the good times we'd shared, the baby on the way. But all I could think about was how she had let me raise another man's child while maintaining a relationship with the real father. The level of deception is still staggering to me. Nash, true to his word, moved to Seattle. But before he left, his lawyer contacted mine. He wants to establish his legal rights as Tommy's biological father. The man who betrayed me, slept with my wife, and lied to my face for years now wants to be formally recognized as my son's father. The audacity of it makes my blood boil. The hardest part of all this has been Tommy. He's too young to understand what's happening, but old enough to know something is wrong. Every time he asks when mommy is coming home, it feels like a knife in my chest. Yesterday, he asked me if he could have his next playdate at Uncle Nash's house because he misses him. I had to leave the room. Andrea's parents have been relentless in their attempts to change my mind about the divorce. Her father came to my office last week, causing a scene in front of my colleagues. He kept saying that I was throwing away a good marriage over ancient history and a mistake. He even had the nerve to suggest that since I'm not Tommy's biological father anyway, I should be more understanding about Andrea's relationship with Nash. I had security escort him out. The betrayal runs deeper than just Andrea and Nash. I've discovered that our entire social circle knew more than they let on. My friend Jack finally confessed that he had caught Andrea and Nash in an intimate moment at a party last year but didn't tell me because he didn't want to get involved. Another friend, Emma, admitted she had known about their friends with benefits arrangement in college. She said she assumed I knew about it too. Andrea's sister Lisa, who had initially tried to play peacemaker, has now shown her true colors. She posted a vague but pointed message on social media about how some men can't handle complex relationships and how forgiveness is a sign of strength. Several mutual friends liked her post. I've blocked them all. The divorce proceedings are moving forward. My lawyer says that since Andrea is living with her parents and I'm staying in our house, this could work in my favor regarding property division. But the custody arrangement is going to be complicated. I'm not Tommy's biological father, but I'm listed on his birth certificate. Nash wants visitation rights, and Andrea is supporting him in this. Work has become my escape. I've thrown myself into it, taking on extra projects and staying late at the office. My boss has been understanding, especially after Andrea's father's scene. She offered me a transfer to our Boston office if I want a fresh start after everything is settled. I'm seriously considering it. Last weekend, while packing up some of Andrea's things that she left behind, I found an old photo album. There were pictures from our college days, me, Andrea, and Nash, all smiling at the camera, arms around each other. Looking at those photos now, I can see what I missed back then. The way they looked at each other, the subtle touches, the inside jokes captured in frozen moments. I was blind to it all. The pregnancy is progressing normally, according to Andrea's doctor. She sends me updates after each appointment, probably trying to keep some connection between us. The baby is a girl. Under different circumstances, this would have been a moment of joy. Now, it just feels complicated. I'll love this child, but she'll grow up in a broken home because of her mother's choices. Update 3. The divorce was finalized last week. It's strange how something that takes years to build can be dismantled in just a few months. Andrea got primary custody of Tommy, which makes sense given the paternity test results. I got partial custody of Emma, our daughter who was born 2 months ago. The custody arrangement allows me to have her every weekend and 2 weekdays. Nash moved back from Seattle last month. His amazing job opportunity apparently didn't work out. Or maybe it was just an excuse to leave town until things cooled down. He and Andrea are officially together now. They're planning to move in together next month, into a house just 15 minutes from where I live. The thought of Tommy living there with them makes me sick, but there's nothing I can do about it. The custody exchanges are awkward. Andrea tries to make small talk, asking about work and how I'm doing. Nash stands in the background, trying to look apologetic. Sometimes he tries to talk to me about Tommy, telling me I'll always be his real dad regardless of biology. I just ignore him. The last time he tried to shake my hand, I walked away mid-sentence. Our friend group has split into factions. Some, like Jack and Emma, cut ties with Andrea and Nash completely. Others think I should have tried harder to save my marriage. Lisa, Andrea's sister, still posts passive-aggressive comments on social media about forgiveness and moving forward. I've heard they're all invited to Andrea and Nash's housewarming party next month. Tommy still calls me daddy, and Andrea says he always will. But now he also spends time with Nash, who's trying to transition from Uncle Nash to some kind of father figure. Last week, Tommy came home from their house talking about how Daddy Nash took him to the zoo. Each time he says that name, it feels like a fresh wound. Emma is the one bright spot in all this. She looks just like me, which is both a relief and a reminder of everything that happened. Andrea suggested hyphenating her last name with Nash's since they're a family now too, but I shut that down immediately. My daughter will have my name, at least I can be sure of that. I decided to take the transfer to Boston. The distance will make the custody arrangement more complicated, but I need a fresh start. Andrea wasn't happy about it, saying it would be harder for Emma to have a relationship with her half-brother. I reminded her that she's the one who created this situation. The house is sold. I'm moving into a 3-bedroom apartment in Boston next month. 1 room for me, 1 for Emma, and 1 I've set up as a play area that can double as Tommy's room if he ever visits. I know it's probably naive to think he will, especially with Nash in the picture now, but I can't quite let go of the boy I raised for 3 years. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't found those messages that day. Would they have continued their affair indefinitely? Would I have lived my whole life not knowing Tommy wasn't mine? Would there have been more secret children? More lies? In a twisted way, maybe finding those messages was a blessing. At least now I know the truth. Last week, I went on my first date since the divorce. It was nothing serious, just coffee with a colleague from the Boston office. But it felt like a step forward. For the first time in a year, I spent an evening not thinking about Andrea or Nash or what could have been. Maybe that's what moving on looks like, small moments of forgetting, until those moments grow longer and the pain grows duller.